Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Fergoshnik. Thank you so much for listening. On the other end of the tin cannon string, we have the editor-in-chief of Vikings Territory, and the writer of many a blog, many an internet. It is my pleasure to introduce Arif Hassan. How you doing, Arif?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fantastically well. Now, we were worried. It had been 2 weeks since we had put out a show, and so we figured we might as well put out 2 this week, just to give you more, just to feed you what you need. Is that sufficient, or is it just that we're just long-winded and didn't want to put out a 2.5-hour episode?
I think probably the latter, but I like how you packaged it.
I feel like we're just trying to give you what you crave. No, that's
no.
Yes. we're giving you what plants crave.
What plants?
It's gonna be great. No, we have heard the emails and the tweets about when is the show coming back. So we're putting out 2 this week. We appreciate the emails, the tweets, the telegraphs, the faxes, the phone calls.
Do not actually appreciate the faxes.
No, faxes can go to hell.
That's for the Denver Broncos, not me.
Yeah, that is not for us. We appreciate the PowerPoints. Oddly enough, Kyle was silent during this whole spiel. I was kind of expecting him to harass us at some point.
Yeah, well, we all have off days.
We all have off days, weeks in this case. So, we're going to head right back into the news here. We do again want to thank you for supporting the show, for listening, and if you would like to donate your tree fitty, or if you'd like to donate your $5 to the show, you can do so at NorseCodePodcast.com. So, we are ad-free. We're going right into the story. And the first thing we want to talk about is Matt Kalil, who it was revealed last week that he had double knee surgery.
Yeah, it's like double fisting, but somehow more depressing. And what do we know? Was anything reconstructed? Was this just a operation to clean a couple of knees? Like he went to a handful of knees.
He just got them. He's just got enough of them lying around.
The bushel.
He's got spares. It's great. But do we know if this was just a cleanup mission, or if this was a patch job, or if he is going to have to retire because he no longer has feet? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's not going to be like the most recent history the Vikings have had of the offensive linemen, where Austin Wentworth and Tiny Richardson retired because of knees. But I think what this is, I think a lot of people were a little bit more alarmed with it than I was reading the story, because the USA Today story that Tom Pelissero published was very not alarming. I guess I'm not alarmed by it because the tone that Tom Pelissero took was not alarmed, and the reason for that is because it didn't sound like any of this was required. It sounded like this was all designed to sort of maximize potential, right? To sort of get his body sort of at optimum strength. So it doesn't sound like he had a knee injury that was fixed, right? It sounded more like, we did some stuff to, like you said, like clean up some stuff in the knee to prevent possible future irritation. And then also, it sounded like there was like a blood pheresis or something. I don't know. They ran his blood through a thing, or they injected platelets into his knees. I don't know. I didn't actually read that part of the story.
He had the surgery in Germany where they like spin his blood and try to reintroduce it in. Like the
USA Today story compared it actually to the Kobe Bryant Germany knee surgery thing, which
the Kobe and Peyton Manning thing.
Yeah, which also Brandon Roy formerly of the Timberwolves and the Trailblazers, also did that, not too successfully, in his unretirement. But that is, that's what it's compared to, but it's like, whatever it is, it's legal here, or it's legal now, I don't know. But yeah, it didn't seem like it was that alarming. It was more like, hey, I'm basically in a contract here, even though my option was picked up, because I can get cut at any time without that option being guaranteed. So I need to make sure that I'm sort of in peak physical condition. This is what I did. It's called Regenix, which sounds like a corporate name, in which blood is removed, isolated, processed, and re-injected into the patient's affected area. That is so vague. What? It's processed. It's isolated.
The explanation as to what they did with the $6 million man was slightly more honest and descriptive as to what they did.
I'm taking a look at the, unlike the Regenokine procedures Kobe Bryant has undergone in Germany, Regenix procedures can be performed in the U.S. under an exemption in the FDA's Code of Federal Regulations. It touts the procedure as the nation's most advanced non-surgical stem cell and blood placement treatments for common injuries and degenerative joint conditions, though it's still a relatively new treatment. Then, as part of his follow-ups, this is different. Kalil also underwent platelet-rich plasma therapy, which is growing in popularity among athletes for its apparent healing powers. Because I guess platelets do more than clot? I'm actually not sure that this is sound science.
Well, if it worked for Kobe, and he's been in real rough shape the last 3 years, but if it worked for Kobe, then it could clearly work for Kalil. I mean,
but
the only thing
there's no evidence that it worked for Kobe. It clearly didn't work for Brandon Roy.
Brandon Roy aside, the only thing that this article seemed to be missing is something along the lines of and in between surgeries, Matt Kalil was just nibbling on a stem cell or something.
Well, I'm glad
nibbling on it like jerky.
I'm glad Pelissero included the apparent healing powers thing. I think he's also a little skeptical. But he basically wrote a tiny 2-paragraph press release in the middle of this article. I don't think that a lot of these athletes think platelets do what they actually do. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I don't think platelets heal anything. I think they just clot stuff.
Someone is getting very, very, very rich off of this procedure that's not actually legal to do in America.
I'm going to Google platelet-rich plasma therapy, and then we can discover live what it is.
And if it works, I mean, I have fairly good insurance through the state of Minnesota. I'm just
do it for the podcast.
Yep, we're doing it for the podcast. We're doing it live. We're just going to see whether or not this is going to be covered through my insurance through you. We'll just see.
All right, so it is blood plasma that's been enriched with platelets. I'm reading off the Wikipedia page, which is it actually looked significantly more credible than the first 2 links that showed up on Google. The concentrated source of autologous platelets, PRP, contains and releases through degranulation several different growth factors. That might be why it's healing. It's not the platelets, it's the growth factors, which sounds sarcastic, but it's not. And other cytokines that stimulate healing of bone and soft tissue. The efficacy of certain growth factors in healing various injuries and the concentration of these growth factors found within PRP are the theoretical basis for the use of PRP in tissue repair. The platelets collected in PRP are activated by the addition of thrombin and calcium chloride, which induces the release of the mentioned factors from the alpha granules. So, screw me, I don't know anything about platelets. The growth factors and other cytokines present in PRP include, then there's a list of stuff that isn't really useful. Interleukin-8, that's what they put in smallpox to make it lethal. I'm not going to go into that. I mean, it's like medicine stuff. Sometimes you put a thing in a thing and it's great, and then in other contexts it's not great. So I wouldn't actually worry about that. It's like the mercury in your vaccines, which actually aren't there anymore. In that dosage, it's fine. Clinical validity. Results of basic science from clinical trials have been confirmed in large-scale controlled clinical trials. For example, clinical use of RP for nerve injury in sports medicine has produced a promising but inconsistent result in early trials. I don't know if that means it was confirmed. A systematic review in 2009 of the literature stated that there are few controlled clinical trials that have adequately evaluated the safety and efficacy of PRP treatments, and concluded that PRP is a promising but not proven treatment option for joint, tendon, ligament, and muscle injuries. Okay.
You're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So that's what we know about Kalil's double knee surgery, is that he went out and had this procedure done. And do you think we have any reason to fear his not starting this season, or not even being ready for training camp?
I think he'll be ready for training camp based off what I've heard. So I don't think I would worry about that. It sounds like the arthroscopic knee surgeries, the cleaning out part of his knee was pretty early in the off season, and then the rest of the stuff is not stuff you need to recover from. So he should be ready to go right away. Unlike John Sullivan's microfracture knee surgery, it took him a while to get going, even though he was ready for training camp. It took him a while to sort of get it together. I think that this is a little different, so no worries.
On the other, on that side of the ball, though, we did have two offensive linemen retire this week.
Yeah, they also don't have knees. So I guess the Vikings are not the place you want to go if you want knees, or Minnesota even, considering Brandon Roy has been brought up at least 4 times now.
in the past 6 minutes, yeah.
Or to choose another Timberwolves example, if I remember correctly, Chase Budinger doesn't have any knees. So this is that.
Are you trying to depress people enough to where they just swerve their vehicle off the road and just go, I'm a Minnesota sports fan, I need to end this? Is that the end goal of this?
This podcast hopes to serve, so yes.
We're gonna talk about Malik Sealy later. It's gonna be great.
Fantastic.
Too soon? I feel like I get in trouble anytime I bring him up. So too soon. So Antonio Richardson and Austin Wentworth are retiring. Although Austin Wentworth ended his career technically after one season due to an illness. But,
I should say he doesn't have knees. It's a leg clot thing. I keep saying knees just because they're legs and it fits the Vikings narrative. But he's had tissue clots in his legs that were blocking blood flow, and so he as a person should be fine. Sounds like it's a career ender from a football perspective. He lost muscle in his left leg, and he'll have to wear a brace for the rest of his life. But he is not sort of at risk for further health complications, it sounds like. But his NFL career is over.
Yep, and Antonio Richardson is actually retiring due to knee issues.
Yes, he is. He does not have enough cartilage in either of his knees.
Wentworth saw action in 7 games, and he only had served as a member of the Vikings this year. So.
Yeah, he's from Fresno State. He's the only member of that offensive line worth a damn that year. The year that he was an undrafted free agent. So he's the only reason Derek Carr is alive right now. Little known fact.
It's so he's the one to blame. Okay. Well, he's nowhere near Oakland, and Ponder's right behind him. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see if Ponder sends anything to Carr asking what he wants on his tombstone. What suit you want to be buried in. So we're moving away from Kalil and to the story that no one can seem to stop talking about. The Tom Brady deflated ball, whether or not Goodell is pandering to the public and is a weenie or has testicular fortitude. We're at that point of the show.
Yeah.
So, Tom Brady. Let's just start with the suspension. Suspended for 4 games. The Patriots lose draft picks, including a first-rounder next year.
Yeah, and stuff. And a 4th rounder the next year, right?
Yeah. And $1 million which goes to show that there's no actual, like, chart as to how fines work in this. It's just completely arbitrary.
Well, sure, but, like, you're going to say this no matter what the punishment is. Like, there's no punishment they could have had that would have been consistent with previous punishments.
Is this sort of like the George Carlin thing where the priest is sitting in the confessional and somebody comes up and says that they fucked a goat and he has to sit there and go, who do I call to find out the penalty for fucking a goat? Like, or a monkey. I think the bit was a monkey. Like, he screwed a monkey. I gotta call like up the chain and how many Hail Marys there. Like, Goodell at this point is just going, well, he refused to turn over his phone.
Okay, well, actually, so that's actually the first thing I would start with, which is the refusal to cooperate is clearly what's being punished more than the actual like ball deflation issue.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and I think that was sort of lost in a lot of the initial reaction. I think a lot of people who were not reacting understood that, and then a lot of people who like took to Twitter in a rage did not. In the
Boston media.
Yeah. And the phrasing of it is so appealing, right? Because you could be like, Ray Rice, clocked his wife and missed 2 games, and Tom Brady deflated some footballs and lost 4 games, which is like, we were criticizing the Ray Rice decision for not being lenient enough, and then he got suspended for like a full year / indefinitely banned. And so that's not really... You can't complain that the NFL was not harsh enough with the domestic violence thing, and then compare Tom Brady's punishment to Ray Rice. Like, that makes no sense, right? If you complain about the NFL being too lenient with the Ray Rice thing, and then being too strict with Tom Brady, you're really only just complaining they were too lenient, which we've already complained about, we already agree. And so that makes no sense, right? But, like, yeah, I think a lot of people were just like, yeah, I mean, he refused to cooperate with the investigation, that's what happens. And it's not just so that's Tom Brady's punishment, the 4 games, but the Patriots were punished not just for having employees who did the thing, which there's conclusive-ish proof of, but and the team is liable for what their employees do. I mean, that's what happened to the Falcons, whose owner clearly did not know what happened, but whose own internal investigation revealed that they pumped in crowd noise, and the Falcons lost money.
Yeah, screw those guys. Vikings have never done that. Screw those guys.
I mean, there's been no internal investigation into what Vikings may or may not have done in the Metrodome. Just offhanded people admitting it later.
Yeah. And I've actually been in that room, and I've figured out fairly quickly how you could have done it. But I didn't see it happen. I've just been in the room in the Metrodome that you could feasibly pull that off.
Right. I can't wait for the Your Team Cheats plug. Oh, there it is. YourTeamCheats.com has a bunch of... It's actually not a really well-named website because it's just a bunch of rules violations, and so I don't think some of it is cheating, right? Like some of it's just like in 2006 when the Jets were caught doing basically what the Patriots did in 2007 for Spygate. I wouldn't have called that cheating. I would have just called that the Jets being dumb, right? Because it was a rule change, and the Jets were late, basically, on following the rule change. And so there's that. And then also the Panthers and the Vikings heating up the ball on the sidelines, the sideline heater. I think that's a rule interpretation thing. I don't think that's cheating. And I think that, but that shows up on the website. And there's a couple of things that show up on the website that I don't think count. Individual athletes taking PEDs are on the website, but still, I mean, it's decent context. But yeah, so this thing, this Deflategate thing, a lot of people are just like, yeah, or a preferred name, Ballghazi.
That's definitely a preferred name.
Clearly, but a lot of people are like, I can't believe Tom Brady got suspended for this ball deflation issue, of which there is no conclusive proof. There's literally no evidence, which people don't have an understanding of, A, what the word evidence means, B, why he was suspended, or C, what you're really complaining about when you talk about consistency of punishment. because individual players that were known to have cheated in the Bountygate scandal were suspended for 8 games, right? And so it's like pretty clear that you can be suspended for a lot for violating NFL rules. I think also with that, you should not compare incidents that would be handled by law enforcement, like domestic violence, right, to incidents that govern the rules of the game. I think they're not comparable for you to complain about, because I think that the NFL has the right to exact additional punishment for the violation of like federal laws or state laws or local laws. It does not mean that they're the executor of legal punishments. There's like another punishment system for that, and they only care sort of in that context image. And so things that deal with internal discipline, like refusing to cooperate, or the competitive nature of the game, like PEDs or ball inflation or whatever, those are 2 separate arenas of punishment. So they should not be compared in terms of whether or not one is consistent with the other, one is more severe than the other. Because again, Ray Rice has another avenue of punishment. And again, we all agree that Ray Rice was not punished enough by the NFL, but also I would not compare the two, because it's a totally different track of thing. And so I think that's pretty dumb. I think it's not well thought out to make those comparisons, because you're literally talking about competitive balance, and in addition to competitive balance, and the authority of the NFL as a governing body, right? If you refuse to cooperate, that's sort of the price. And the NFL is not saying we have an inherent right to your phone records and stuff. It's basically saying you don't have to give us your phone records, but this is the cost of doing that. Because we are an organization that you signed a contract with. This was negotiated in your contract by way of the comprehensive bargaining agreement, and that you signed into this balance of power by signing that contract. You could refuse to sign your contract, and you never have to give your phone records to us, because why would you have to do that? And so, as a corporate entity that conducts basically internal evaluations of whether or not employees are following staff policies, that's what it is. It chooses to conduct those investigations exceedingly thoroughly, and that's something that they signed up for. And when those employees who have the right to refuse, like they have like a federal right to do that, when they refuse to give up personal records, then the company, who has it again written in an agreement, then the company gets to say, well, okay, we're not going to sue you or anything, right? You didn't violate a law. We're not going to draw charges on you. But that means that the cost of that is that you, because you've interfered with an internal company investigation as to whether or not you violated staff policy, are now suspended for pay, for working. And so that's what it was. It does not strike me as particularly egregious or harsh or surprising. And I think that no matter what the NFL does, it's going to be inconsistent with the previous punishment. The NFL has been inconsistent, like tough, right? Right, exactly. And so every future punishment is going to be inconsistent with the past punishments, because all the past punishments have been inconsistent. And at some point, either now or in the future, the NFL is going to exact a punishment that is perfectly appropriate, and it's going to be totally inconsistent with all the past punishments. And that's not necessarily a fair criticism to say, well, that was inconsistent. Because if they implement a consistent policy that weights all of, every possible rule violation and every possible aggravating circumstance, which again, even when you take a look at the domestic violence policy that the NFL has, it has a rough outline, right? It has a rough outline of, I think was it 6 games and then a year? That's just, like I said, it's a rough outline, and the NFL can say there are extenuating circumstances and say that it's not going to do the 4 or 6 games or whatever the first violation is, and it's going to do 2 games instead because charges weren't brought against you, and there's not very good evidence, and there's a good argument that self-defense, whatever, right? Or there
you were just doing stupid things after one,
right? Yeah, exactly. Or there were aggravating circumstances, so we're going to have more than 4 or 6 games, or whatever our rough outline says, because the evidence was very culpatory, and it was very definitive, and it was, and you're a repeat offender, maybe not of this particular thing, but of other, sort of violent things. You've got run-ins, all of these other things that can aggravate their circumstances. And so even if the NFL has like a list or an Excel spreadsheet, basically, that properly weights all of those things and has every possible rule violation and every possible extenuating and aggravating circumstance and can properly apply everything, and it all makes sense when you go over it, review it, look through it. If they implemented that today, it would be inconsistent with all the previous policies. So, whatever, right? Like, I would like consistency to happen in the NFL, and if tomorrow we found out that Teddy Bridgewater was taking, like, banned mind-enhancing drugs or whatever, and the NFL punished him, right? It was inconsistent somehow. I don't know what punishment they could possibly levy that would be inconsistent with the Tom Brady thing, but if we found definitively that it was inconsistent with the Tom Brady thing, then we could criticize the two in relation to each other, but I don't think we could criticize the punishment that they would levy on Teddy or the punishment that they would levy on Tom individually. I think we just criticize them sort of as a whole for being inconsistent, but I don't think that the criticism of this specific punishment as being inconsistent with previous punishments makes a lot of sense, because at some point you have to levy a punishment, and no matter what, that's going to be inconsistent. At some point you have to establish a standard. And I think that the refusal to cooperate stuff is actually pretty egregious by the NFL standards. And I know Drew Magary wrote a very compelling article on Deadspin about, or McGarry, I keep on calling him Magary. Drew Magary wrote a very compelling piece on Deadspin about how the NFL thinks it's all high and mighty, and that's true. Right? The NFL doesn't have the right to your phone records, but I mean, tough. You signed those rights away.
If it's been previously negotiated, you're kind of fucked.
Right.
Although it still does feel like the NFL is using either a dartboard or a 20-sided die to figure out some of these the extras as far as punishment goes.
Right.
Did you need that extra draft pick for the
fourth? Yeah, right.
Did you really need that one?
We determined it's worth this many points of draft capital. We figure you're the Patriots, you can get a pretty bad draft spot, so you have to get the fourth round. And we don't want to take 2 picks in 1 year, so if you add up all the points, it's a first round this year and a fourth round next year. That's what the point board says.
Did it actually say that? Correct me if I'm wrong, but did it actually say that for the first rounder next year, it's actually just going to say vacated by the Patriots or something like that?
No, they're probably just going to add an extra pick at the end of the 7th. Because what happens is, because this happened with the Saints, there's no 32nd pick. Everyone just moves up one to where the Patriots spot would have been. And that's it. And the Patriots get their spot in the second round, whatever. And then they calculate the compensatory picks, and then they dole those out. And then this happens every year. When those don't add up to 32, they just give extra picks at the bottom of the 7th in draft order. And now we can just add another one. If not, it's also possible that they don't do it, right? And they just have 255 picks.
Mr. Irrelevant, Mr. Irrelevant manages to mean less.
Don't you talk about Mr. Irrelevant that way.
Mr. Irrelevant has feelings, damn it. He has a family.
Well, what it means is that there's no true Mr. Irrelevant. We can't award the Lozman Trophy next year if they don't give the 256th pick. Because it's not a true Mr. Irrelevant. Because you have to be the 256th most desirable prospect, not the 255th.
Nope. That dog don't hunt. Nope. So we were talking on the show earlier, and or in the pre-show, and I was talking about what I want out of this whole thing. And what I want, especially after his spirited performance after the AFC Championship game, I want the Tom Brady apology. I want that press conference. I need to say I'm sorry for what I did without actually A, admitting I did anything, or B, actually saying the words I'm sorry. But do it by saying 56,000 words, and take questions, but not admit fault. And if you could show up to this with all of your Super Bowl rings too on your fingers, like that just becomes your look. Like you're just going to slowly but surely become the NFL's version of Suge Knight. Just show up and thug it up. Like that is what I want out of this most. I just want Tom Brady to just embrace it, be like, well, I'm kind of hosed here anyway, so I'm going to do the appeal thing. But while that's going on, I need to appear apologetic or something like that. So I'm here to talk to the press. But have you seen how nice these rings are? Have you seen the rings?
So I'm taking a look at the 2012 draft, which is when the Saints were docked the pick. So they've got the second-round pick forfeited as part of the punishment for the team's bounty scandal. Then you've got the Raiders blowing a pick on Terrell Pryor in the supplemental draft. And then you've got the Detroit Lions losing a pick due to tampering. And that adds up to 3, right? 3 lost picks, one of them as a part of the supplemental draft. And they didn't add any extra picks at the bottom of the 7th, so it goes to 253 instead of 256. Which, by the way, Chandler Harnish was a member of the Vikings practice squad. That Mr. Irrelevant, not a true Mr. Irrelevant, was on the team.
How about that? So, what do you think about the deflating of balls and whether or not that played a factor in the fact that the Colts got their asses handed to them even after they got the regular balls put in?
I mean, I don't think it had much of a factor on the Colts game, but I think that the issue, of course, is whether or not the Patriots gained an unfair advantage throughout the season and perhaps since 2007 or however long this program is allegedly in place. And I think that they probably did. I don't think that the fumble stuff that was published at Sharp Football is very compelling at all. Because you're working with high variance data, which is fumble rates, and has been pointed out on several really well statistically minded blogs and publications and so on, was actually done very poorly. And if you just take away games played in a dome instead of taking away dome teams, the Patriots don't end up as having impossible fumble rates or anything. I think that sort of stuff is over the top, and I don't think that it leads to the conclusion that the Patriots had an immense advantage in being able to avoid fumbles as a result. But I do think that the Patriots may have improved their fumble luck / ability to lose fumbles or whatever, prevent lost fumbles. Sorry, not lost fumbles, to prevent fumbling, I should say, because I don't think that ball inflation affects recovery rates. They may have been able to do that, and I think that that's a possibility. Scott Kaxmore at Football Outsiders, formerly of a bunch of different football statistics blogs and websites, looked at... So Peter King published a thing in Monday Morning Quarterback about how, Tom Brady has thrown X number of touchdowns in away games and X number of touchdowns in home games. And they're very similar and arguably better, which is just such an extraordinarily poor use of stats. I'm angry. Like touchdowns per game, really? Like, who uses that? If you have
lazy people,
right? But I mean, if you have to throw more passes because it's an away game, then you're going to throw more touchdowns, even if your touchdown rate is a little lower, right? And then that's an example of your team doing worse because it has to catch up, right? It may even be an example of you doing worse. Because I don't think Peter King included the interception rate, which is pretty important too. But Scott Kaxmore looked at changes in interception rate from home and away games, and I guess Tom Brady in his first look he ranked number 1, but if you include the 2014 season, he ranked number 3, of all time, basically, that he had a massively bigger interception rate on the road than he did at home, and I don't know if that's a thing that has to do with ball deflation, but it is perhaps telling that no other elite quarterback ended up that high on the list, despite the fact that Aaron Rodgers has this nosebleed record of not throwing interceptions at home. It turns out it's because he doesn't throw very many interceptions on the road either, so his percentage change is not that significant, not as significant as Tom Brady's. I think that there are impacts on the game, but I also think that it's not as big a deal anyway, because I think that other teams did it, which is not to say... I think that the impact on competitiveness is relatively low because other teams did it. I think that whether or not you should not punish a team for violating the rules is not affected by whether or not other teams did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that the one takeaway we can have from this entire story is that Tom Brady's employees, or not his employees, but the people who was doing this for Tom, fucking hated him.
That is just so awesome.
Despised him. Like, the messages there are just visceral. Like,
well, what are the texts that just fuck Tom Brady?
Yeah. Which, that's something you would send to me or I would send to you, not we are employed by the Patriots and therefore, like...
Right? No, it's great. That's
something you send to a buddy when they have him starting in fantasy, not I'm supposed to be lowering the PSI for his footballs, like...
Oh, by the way, let's talk about this evidence standard thing real quick. So, when people say the evidence is only circumstantial or that there is no evidence, I think that they do not understand the nature of evidence. Which is to say, what evidence is not held to a standard of whether or not it definitively proves or doesn't prove anything. I don't think anybody has ever considered, in the realm of law or debate, evidence to be something that definitively proves a thing. You don't find any evidence in courtrooms 99.9% of the time in trials that definitively proves anything, ever. You don't find them in civil suits, you don't find them in criminal suits. Evidence is not 100% conclusive, because evidence is a thing that provides information. Witness testimony is evidence, footprints are evidence, things that provide information for you to consider as evidence. Sometimes evidence goes both ways, because they have evidence that indicates that there's a good chance that maybe my client is innocent, and they have evidence that indicates that maybe there's a good chance that my client is not, or your client is not innocent, right? Evidence provides information which suggests a conclusion. Sometimes that the conclusion that is being suggested by the evidence changes upon examination. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes the evidence provides, just context, right? And so people seem to have this idea that evidence is conclusive and proves things, and it does not prove things in the vast majority of instances where the term evidence or the concept of evidence is being used. When we debate about which player is better, right? When we were like, you know what, I think, Sharif Floyd is better than Aaron Donald. Screw that guy. You could say, well, my evidence indicates that, you don't have to say my evidence. Aaron Donald had more sacks than Sharif Floyd, I think. If that's true, that's evidence. If it's not true, well, it's still kind of evidence. It's just not good evidence. But if it's true, it's evidence, but it's also not conclusive in proving that Aaron Donald is a better player than Sharif Floyd, right? Sharif Floyd had a higher PFF rating per snap, right, than Aaron Donald. Those two pieces of evidence are pointing in opposite directions. They are not conclusive, right? And they're subject to interpretation, and they require some definitions about what a better player is, and how this is gathered, what it means, whether or not the NFL is very good at recording sack data, whether or not PFF is very good at grading. Those are things, right? And people get convicted on circumstantial evidence because otherwise you would not be able to convict the vast majority of criminals. I mean, people were complaining that Aaron Hernandez was convicted because of circumstantial evidence. But yeah, the circumstantial evidence was so strong that there was no reasonable doubt that he did not violate the law. And so circumstantial evidence does not mean it doesn't prove a thing, right? And so that's my first bit. The second thing is that people are holding this investigation to a standard that investigations are never held to. Investigations, or internal company investigations, always held to basically civil liability standards, which is, if I sue you, would I win? In this case, that's the standard they used, which is called a preponderance of evidence standard, because there's no innocent party there's a right party and a wrong party, and the party that is more likely to be right is awarded the damages, and that's basically, if there's a 51% chance that I'm right, then I win the case. And that's what the preponderance of evidence standard is in civil suits. That's exactly the standard the Wells Report used, and so when they use the language more probable than not, they're in fact being very definitive. They're being very aggressive, and the language that they use does not sound very conclusive, because I guess the word conclusive doesn't apply here, but it doesn't sound very forward and very he should be punished and very important. But it turns out, in fact, yes, all of those things, the language is in fact very important and very heavy and very conclusive in one sense of the word. So those are the things I wanted to get away. That was a thing that I had as a rant in my head for a long time that I did not get out on Twitter or in an article, and so this is my vehicle for doing that.
And that's why we have a podcast, folks.
Hooray.
Hooray. So, we've wrapped up our Ballghazi discussion, I think. Mm-hmm. So let's start hitting some of the Twitter questions, and we have quite the mailbag this week. And let's take a look at Tommy Gunn, who asks, what names are the biggest concerns for the Vikings drafted by the rest of the NFC North? Excellent question.
This is, I think this is a phenomenal question. So obviously, I think the first name that comes to mind is Kevin White from the Chicago Bears. The Vikings were not, they say, encouraged to draft Trey Waynes because of Kevin White, which I actually do believe. I think that they would have drafted Trey Waynes with or without the Kevin White pick. But I think that he's a very good player. I was, bagging on him all offseason because I thought he was the third best receiver in the draft. But that does not mean he's not a very good receiver. And so I would be worried about him. I am not as worried about Eddie Goldman. I think a lot of people were down on him, and a lot of people were really up on him. I'm down on him. Hronis Grassi, the center from the Chicago Bears, formerly of Oregon, I think is very good, but we're not going to see him for a little bit. The fifth-round pick, Adrian Amos, I would worry about. So those are the two names from Chicago I'd worry about. Adrian Amos, a free safety who, yeah, he has some stuff to work on, but he's extremely athletic. I think he's relatively instinctive. And so I would worry about him. From the Detroit Lions, I think that their draft was a bit out of sorts, but I think that for the most part they ended up getting some good players. I think that the Quandre Diggs pick in the 6th round will turn out to be pretty underrated. I think that he's an extremely good cornerback. They're probably going to only play him in the slot because he's tiny, both short and light. But I think that he's an extremely good slot cornerback, and I'd watch out for him for a couple of years. 7th round pick, Corey Robinson, I thought was a very good 7th round pick. That probably won't matter as much as the 1st and 2nd round picks. I thought Laken Tomlinson was overdrafted, but that does not mean he's not a good player. I thought he was maybe a 2nd round pick because he is a pretty good guard. I wouldn't worry about him sort of in the same way, but I think that he's someone who's going to make him better. Amir Abdullah, I think, is probably the best pick from the Lions class. And so I think that that's an issue. I think he's going to be very good. And so I think that the Lions' running game is much more improved than people think, because I think Amir Abdullah is he's possibly better than Melvin Gordon, and I think a lot of people don't realize that Amir Abdullah is extremely good. So I would worry about him a lot. From the Packers, I think the Demarius Randall pick was bad. I think the Quentin Rollins pick was not good. I think the Ty Montgomery pick is going to be interesting because he's a very boom-bust prospect. If he works out, he'll work out in a huge way. If he doesn't work out, he's going to be what we fear Cordero Patterson is, but in the 3rd round, that's not as big a deal. But he's a running back playing receiver, and I think they should just turn him into a running back, and if they do, I would be more worried. But as a receiver, I'm not as worried. I thought the Brett Hundley pick was inspired. I thought that was an extremely good pick. I thought the Jake Ryan pick was pretty good. But I would worry that they're going to have quarterback continuity in a big way, because I think Brett Hundley is a lot better than a lot of his detractors said. And in fairness, I think detractors were pushing back against the idea that Brett Hundley should be selected in the first or second round. But I think that he's a very good quarterback that should have been selected in the second round that dropped to the fifth round. And that's a guy I worry about in a couple of years. Other than that, I'm not as worried about the Packers draft class. I thought they had a bad overall draft. I just think the Jake Ryan pick was okay and the Brett Hundley pick was extremely good. But they had a bad draft, so whatever.
Yeah. That's too bad. Packers had a bad draft. Oh, damn.
Right.
Alex Gobble asks, who among the 2015 Vikes draft class is most likely to exceed expectations?
Edmund Robinson. He's a seventh-round pick, and I already explained why I loved him. I think T.J. Clemmings has high expectations despite being a fourth-round pick, so I won't pick him. I think Eric Kendricks is probably going to exceed expectations, but I think Vikings Twitter and Vikings media have done enough of a job pumping him up that even if he does exceed expectations, there's not a lot of room for him to sort of blow the doors away, because if he's an all-pro guy, you just feel like, well, he's the most distinct linebacker in the draft. That makes sense. So I think Edmund Robinson, because if the bar is expectations, I think that Robinson will not only make the roster, but stay on the roster for years to come, and then possibly be a very good backup, which I think would do a lot more than a typical seventh-round pick, a significant amount more than a typical seventh-round pick.
Yeah. Next question from Zen Cupid. I might be the one to actually have to answer this one. It says, I'm near Green Bay for work, and the entire class is made up of Packers fans. How can I survive this?
Yeah,
it's not easy. It's not easy being surrounded by Packers fan, or even one Packers fan that's very close to you. But they're especially because Packers fans are a lot like, especially in this area, especially in Minnesota, North Dakota, like Wisconsin area, Packers fans are much like vegans or people who do CrossFit. They will tell you that they are a Packers fan far before you even mention football to them. So it's difficult, but most Green Bay fans I've met are fairly reasonable, albeit they seem to have some extreme chip on their shoulder, like, oh, that's cute that you had an 8-8 team that year or whatever. You will end up surviving. I don't know if I would suggest the Randy Moss approach of mooning them.
I'm not against this.
It's not a bad place to start. Plus, it helps. Plus, it helps show dominance in front of the pride. Like, you have to show something. It's the prison thing. You kick somebody's ass the first day, or you're somebody's bitch. Like that's what you need to be doing.
Is that the approach?
I feel like I got off course there, but we're gonna move on, and also talk about something Packers related. Apparently, because Daniel P asks, what would you call Matt Asiata if he played for the Packers? I'd call him Matt Asiago, like the cheese. I don't think there's a better name for that.
Yeah, I would call him bad, but I think Daniel just wanted to throw in the.
He just wanted the.
Fun. I think it was a real question. I think he was just like, I've got a great pun.
I've got this thing in my back pocket.
Thanks for writing in, Daniel. We just made fun of you.
Yes, thank you. Jonathan asks, what's the best hotel to stay at in Canton for the Hall of Fame game? Do you have any hotel, any Ohio hotel knowledge for Jonathan?
I don't, and any response I have would be driven by Google, so I'm just going to tell you beforehand, I'm just not going to do that because I wouldn't be doing you any additional service, so.
Like, because we're not paid by either Hotels.com or Priceline.com or anything like that, I'm afraid we can't really provide the type of information you would desire here.
I would say this, though. Alan Page grew up in Canton, Ohio. He's the only person to both literally build the Hall of Fame and be enshrined in it. So I would visit his high school, Central Catholic. He's the best player of all time, so whatever.
All right. Luke Larson has a really great question for us. The situation with the punter is still poor. Do you think Rick will bring in competition for Locke?
So the person that they brought in undrafted free, or not undrafted free agency for a minicamp tryout, Kyle Christie, I don't think was good enough to earn a contract. Remember, there is still one open spot left on the roster for the Vikings, and they're just trying to figure it out. Could be one of the guys at minicamp tryouts. It could be an undrafted free agent. It could be a free agent, like Brandon Spikes, unlikely. But I don't think it will be a punter, and I don't think it'll be the minicamp guy, Kyle Christie. I think that the Vikings might think that if they have a better long snapper in, is it Shane McDermott? If they have a better long snapper in him than they do in Colin Loeffler, who was not very good last year at all. A lot of people remember the Miami game where Terrence Fede blocked a punt because of a really, really bad snap from Loeffler. There was actually a lot of problems last year for Loeffler. Related mostly to accuracy and less to the problem that happened in the Miami game. And I think that they think that fixing that issue, or if McDermott wins the competition outright, who, by the way, McDermott was Locke's long snapper at UCLA, so they have chemistry, whatever that means. They think that may be able to fix the solution, may be able to fix the problem. And one of Locke's weaknesses is adjusting to poorly thrown snaps. I think it's actually one of the things Chris Kluwe was extraordinarily good at. He wasn't a very good directional punter, and I think that, I don't think it's an accident that as soon as Mike Prefer joined, Chris Kluwe became a much worse punter. I think Mike Prefer is actually not as talented a special teams coach as people seem to think, but especially a punting coach. But I think the one thing that Chris Kluwe was very good at was adjusting to high snaps or bad snaps, and he was one of the best in the league at getting the ball off quickly. I don't think Locke has that talent, and I think that if you remove that weakness from showing up every game, maybe that can fix some of his problems as a punter. And I think that there's some reason for this belief among the Vikings organization. So I don't think they'll bring in a punter for competition. I think they think this long snapper thing might be the key to fixing the problem. I kind of disagree because I think he has some other problems, but I think that it's not a bad way to go about it.
It's certainly it's certainly an interesting approach to not just go and have him compete right away, but instead try to fix what leads to his problems.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that if they think this could solve the problem, then it prevents you, because we know we have to fix the long snapper problem. Even if Colin Loeffler was good, he's old, and so you want to replace him anyway. So I think that if you fix one thing at a time, you can identify what the problem is, and you can figure out whether or not you need to fix something else. And knowing you have to fix this one thing, maybe you don't have to fix the other thing. So I think that the process is relatively sound, and I think that the only time they're ever going to address this punter problem is if they can definitively know that punter is at issue. Also, I think his contract expires this year, if I remember correctly. So might as well wait until next year to compete, and if he earns his second contract, he earns his second contract.
Yeah. Or we just do what the Raiders did and just draft a punter in the first or second round, and we can be cool like Al Davis.
So by the way,
right?
The punters that the Raiders have drafted have been very good. Like, we'll make fun of them when we should, because it's a terrible use of a pick. Those are really good punters. Holy crap. Yeah. Marquette King is good now. Who knew? Hey, he wasn't drafted, but just saying the Raiders know how to pick punters.
It's nice. Them. It's exactly because they need them. It's a strength because it's required.
If you're exposed to the skill often, you'll know how to evaluate it.
Yes, exactly. It's sort of like just watching the fundamentals of the WNBA. I think this is why we come to games. We come for the punting here in Oakland. We may have covered this in our draft preview, but we can kind of rehash this a little bit. Nick asks, what do you think of the idea of having Kendricks play outside linebacker instead of in the middle?
Yeah, like I said, I much prefer that. But I think the Vikings don't think Chad Greenway is a huge problem at weak side linebacker. And I think the Vikings do think they don't have an answer at middle linebacker, and so that's how they're approaching the issue. I would prefer Kendricks playing will linebacker and Audie Cole playing inside linebacker, but it is what it is.
Kyle asks his most reasonable question, possibly of any podcast. Kyle asks, this draft, am I happy or am I sad?
Happy. That's just not my. I already covered the draft, so happy.
Yeah. No, we should be pretty happy, and Rick got his 10 picks.
Yeah,
and
he got his 10 picks. I would have given this draft maybe a B+. So yeah.
Yep, that's we were hoping for 10, and that's exactly what we got. So we got a couple email questions as well from Nathan S. First question is, a lot of what Norv Turner was first doing with Teddy was 5 and 7 step drops for deep shots. Yeah. The O-line could not handle giving him that amount of time, especially off the left side. With the loss of Jennings and the addition of Wallace, it seems he wants to go back to that style of play. Without a high investment of quality draft picks on the line, do you think the Vikings are hoping one of the quality linemen step up, or do the Vikings secretly trust Berger or Yankee and Kalil to provide the time for the deep game?
I think that they trust Kalil and Berger/Yankee, and I think Yankee. And I think that you're right that they will continue to call for 5 and 7 step drops. I think it took a very long time for the Vikings to move away from that last year, and they did. They had more 3 step drops, and they had more quick passes and stuff like that. And I think that drafting Michael Prude is another step towards reducing the burden on the offensive line. But I think that for the most part, I think that that's a correct interpretation, that you're going to see a lot more longer developing plays, which often means deep shots. And I think that they trust the offensive line coaching to get it right, which I would be worried about, especially for Teddy's sake. Turner thinks that Peterson is a very good pass blocker when he's blocking interior players instead of edge players, which is not what he did under Musgrave or Bevel. And so, I mean, there's that. But yeah, I would continue to be worried. I think we're going to see a couple more tight end chips. We saw a lot of that in the middle and the end of the season, where the tight end would chip the defensive end a lot more often than he used to, and sort of help ease the burden a little bit. But yeah, I think the Vikings' plan is to trust the competition to produce a good left guard, and I think they're going to trust Matt Kalil to fix it. I think long term they're going to make another decision on the offensive line, but I think that they've made that decision a lot easier by drafting both Tyrus Thompson and T.J. Clemmings.
Next thing is over under 290 rushing attempts for Peterson this year.
Under, and not because Peterson is going to hold out or anything like that. I think that they just have quality running backs, and I think that McKinnon is so very good that it would be a shame not to give him a bunch of attempts, even if they don't give him the lion's share of attempts.
He holds out, right? There's no way he plays. He signs up and ready to go week 1. He's gonna hold out for the first week at least, right?
That's so tough, because I think that there's a very good argument that he cares so much about his legacy and so much about records and so much about being the best running back ever. He cares so much about that he doesn't want to miss playing time, and I think that's a really good argument. But they are so pissed.
Ben Dogra is just livid.
And
morning, noon, night.
Yeah, and of course he had a lot more conciliatory language after the Vikings didn't trade Peterson during the draft. But I think that the talk, right, of the Vikings having all the leverage is enough to inspire an agent like Dogra and even a player like Peterson to at least test the statement. Because if you keep saying stuff like that, like, I don't think it's best that he plays for the Vikings, and you keep on sort of demanding trades and stuff like that, you need to from their perspective, do the best you can to prove that you do have leverage in this situation, because if Pearson does successfully hold out, and by successfully I mean maintains an ability to just not play for a couple of weeks, the Vikings are in a much worse position to trade him at the trade deadline in order to get value out of him. And so this is to prove, in the long run for Dogra, and in the short run, like as a point of pride for Peterson, that the Vikings should have traded them. And I think that Dogra improves his leverage in future negotiations if he can convince his client to continue holding out. And I think that would be a win for Dogra if he can orchestrate that.
I was going to say, that's kind of assuming that Dogra becomes either reasonable or shows some form of sanity during any of this.
I mean, he
gambled a lot on this and appears to have lost.
That's true. He also made a ton of money during the draft because his clients got drafted really well and really highly. They got overdrafted, actually. A lot of them got drafted beyond or above where their position on the consensus board was. And so I would not call him a bad agent because he is making money and doing work. So he lost J.J. Watt, and he lost, I think, another client. And then
the new people at the draft made up for all the people that have left him in the past couple months.
Right, and he made money off of J.J. Watt's deal, right? So it's not like he just lost out on all this money that J.J. Watt made. And, I mean, the people he lost have signed long-term contracts. And then he just gained a bunch of people that have signed some relatively lucrative contracts who are young, half of whom should be expected to sign very lucrative second contracts. So, I mean, he's not a terrible agent. He's just pretty pushy on this one issue, and maybe he's making the wrong decision on this one issue. But he's certainly net gaining quality clients, which I think is a lot of people are missing.
Or he's just a big believer in the whole there's no publicity, there's no bad publicity, there's just publicity. So he's just trying to get his name out in every way he can. Like, oh yeah, Dogra, that name sounds familiar. As opposed to, oh yeah, Dogra, that name sounds familiar. What an asshole.
Yeah, I think for agents that might actually be true. People know...
What's the famous agent I'm thinking
Drew
of? This. Thank you.
Yeah, people know Drew Rosenhaus and Tom Condon, and I think that's a big part of their appeal. I mean, Drew Rosenhaus is a huge asshole, and he's the most holdout, trigger-happy agent that the NFL has, basically. I mean, Darrelle Revis held out every single year and got a new contract every single year. Even after coming off an ACL injury, he held out, got a new contract. That's nuts. And it's seen as asshole behavior, right? And it's seen as the player has no leverage. I mean, that's the phrase, right? The player has no leverage. Why is he holding out? He just got a new contract, or he's under contract. The team either has to pay him or he doesn't get to play. And that didn't work with Drew Rosenhaus or his clients, who have generally had a lot of success with holding out. A lot. And so I would not say that they don't have leverage when they hold out, because the most famous agent and the most successful agent in the NFL uses that as their go-to strategy. The leverage that they supposedly don't have.
Next question. What metric does Waynes have to achieve this year as a rookie for people to eat crow on his college evaluation? So, Arif, what does Trey Waynes have to do to prove you wrong?
Well, I did say in the last podcast that him doing well or poorly in the first year probably doesn't mean a ton, but I think that if he does well, it means more than if he does poorly. You know what I mean? Like, it's more likely that you have development if you do poorly than someone's going to figure you out if you do well. So I will say that. But the second thing is, it's really difficult to say there's a metric. D'Angelo Hall gets a lot of interceptions. He's a bad cornerback, so I wouldn't say interceptions are a metric. People don't seem to like PFF scores for cornerbacks. Otherwise, they would like Josh Robinson. So I don't know. I would say I don't like passer rating against because it's very dependent on small stats, or I should say high variance stats, like interceptions and touchdowns. And that's very situational too. Touchdowns are very situational. And touchdowns that you give up are not always your fault as a cornerback. And so I would not say passer rating against. I don't know. I don't know if there's an objective statistic for a cornerback that you could say proves that they're good or bad, but I would use PFF score as probably the closest to an evaluation metric that would be out of my hands. So in that sense, objective, even though they are subjective in the sense of me evaluating it using this metric, it is objective. So I would say PFF scores, and I would say a 0.0 or higher. They don't have to be in the green, right? Trey Waynes does not have to be in the green, but I think a 0.0 or higher would be good for him this year. But I would also not say he fails if he gets below that. Like I would not say that if he gets graded as the worst cornerback in the NFL, I would not say that is a failure of the pick. And so it's all positive for him. So all he has to do is get a 0.0 or higher, and I think that me and I don't know about Darren because Darren's not being held to a standard on a podcast. But me and maybe some other people would be convinced that they were wrong in their evaluation. But again, I wouldn't be completely convinced. I would just be strongly compelled by the available evidence that the Waynes pick was better than not. And I mean, it's also possible that he doesn't improve, right? If he ends up being a league average cornerback throughout his career, 0.0 on the PFF score, right? If he ends up being a league average cornerback throughout his career, then I think it's probably a bad pick because I'm guessing one of those three other cornerbacks I mentioned are better than that, and they should have picked blank, right? And that's obviously hindsight oriented, but that's how you evaluate drafts.
So we have two more questions here. Here's one that's also from Nathan S. On a scale of number of games Brady actually misses to number of insufferable Pats fans right now, how bad will our offensive line be this year?
It's not going to be as bad as insufferable Pats fans.
Because they're raising money to pay for the fine of their billionaire owner.
I love that. That is so hilarious.
Like between that and the chaining yourself to the NFL headquarters thing.
That sounds like that was a publicity stunt by Barstool Sports. So.
But still,
I agree. Right.
The raising money thing
that's phenomenal. Oh my, that's so dumb. It is an inspirational level of dumb. I will never be that dumb. That makes me so happy. But yeah, I think that the line is going to be significantly better this year because I think that the chance or probability of that level of injury on the line, I think, is low. Especially given the Vikings' generally good track record with injuries relative to the rest of the league. I think injury for 90% of the teams in the NFL, or actually less than 90, closer to 80% of the teams in the NFL, seems to be pretty random. For the Colts and the Packers, it seems to be not random. It seems to be that there's something with those two organizations, be it their training, their nutrition, their field, their practice turf, whatever. Something causes more injuries for them. For the 49ers and the Vikings, it seems to be the opposite. But this last year was not a pretty good example of that. It could be that because the Vikings changed their nutrition program under Mike Zimmer, that they were more likely to suffer from injuries. I hope that's not the case. Or it could be, a fluke. Either way, I think it is unlikely that the Vikings, who had an astounding number of injuries on their offensive line, are unlikely to get that number of injuries, at least on their offensive line. If they get injuries, it's probably going to be elsewhere. So I think that alone will improve the offensive line. I think that Charlie Johnson was a below average. I wouldn't say he was awful, right? I think that he ended up being a scapegoat for a lot of the offensive line's problems. I thought he was a below average guard, and I think that it is possible that whoever wins the guard competition is average or above average this next year. Matt Kalil is more likely to play closer to how he did in the last 5 games than he did in the first 11 games. I don't think those last 5 games were good. I think they were better, and I think a lot of people are confusing the two. I don't think that he improved enough for me to say that I'm optimistic. And also, it turns out there's random noise, and that there's flukes in play, and that sometimes players are better at the end of seasons, and it doesn't mean much. Which, I mean, we could apply that towards our optimism towards Teddy just as well. So maybe be careful throwing that around. But I think it's more likely he plays closer to that 5-game stretch than the 11-game stretch before it, because I think it's unlikely he's going to be the worst tackle in the NFL. Maybe because he's more talented than that, and I don't think the knee thing is as much about injury as it is about performance. So I think that the line is going to be better.
Now he's bionic. It'll be
fine. He just put some, machines in there. It's fine. So I think that the line will be better, and I think that the offensive line coach is a bit more engaged, and so I don't know if the line will be in the top half in terms of being able to pass block, but I think it'll be close to average, even if it is a little below average.
So, final question, and this just came in. We have a good one from Logan Marinoff-Chin.
Hate that guy.
Yes, who asks, would you rather the Vikings win Super Bowl 50, but you tear both of your ACLs, or the Vikings go 4-12, but they manage to beat Detroit and Green Bay twice each?
I don't use my ACLs. Are you kidding me?
I've been in a wheelchair for about 5-6 months, and it sucks. But you know what would make it not suck? Wearing that Super Bowl 50 hat that says the Vikings won.
Yeah, right. No, I have had so many injuries. I haven't had an ACL, I will say that. But I've had back injuries, and that's pretty bad.
And back sucks, but right. I managed to have a major knee sprain and meniscus tear and severe ankle sprain on the same leg, and that just knocked me out for a real long time. And that rehab sucked. But I think I could do it with both legs.
Right. Yeah, I don't have to move for my job. I just have to sit.
Yeah, I think my problem now is that in my current place there are stairs, and so that would be a problem because the place I was at before did not have stairs when that was going on. So,
ooh, yeah,
there's that consideration.
There's that. Yeah.
But
how long does the biggest part of the pain portion last?
Well, it really depends because the first 2 weeks are pretty much just let's get this swelling down, let's get this to not hurt like hell. But and especially after, because you'd have to have surgery with it too. Like you couldn't just wipe my ACL and it just grows back. Like you're gonna have the surgery too, and so that's the healing pain. So you got about 2 weeks of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you basically end up with Eye of the Tiger every time you have to get up and move somewhere or do something.
That's
exhausting. This is going to affect every aspect of your life for a real long time, like a shower or just going to the bathroom, or the kid runs by and decides to smack you on the leg where your scar is.
Whew. Well, I don't have to deal with that.
I will send my son over to you.
Why? That's so cruel.
Roll 50 right after the win, and just right smack on the leg.
You would not respect the sacrifice I made for us to win the Super Bowl. You just be like, he didn't have to deal with the same ACL pain I did. Screw that guy.
It's just the no kid tax that you're gonna have to pay. That's what this is. This has nothing to do with that. With you didn't respect the thing. No. This is just you get 8 hours of sleep at night, asshole, if you really wanted it. So I'm actually going to start training the kid now, like a Manchurian Candidate type of thing, and just it'll be unleashed. I'll have a word that'll trigger it. It'll be great. I like this plan. I like ending on this idea. This is going to go terribly. As much as I'd like to, most likely we'll end up beating Detroit twice in that year anyway, so that one's kind of okay, whatever. But Green Bay twice in the year would be nice, but not as nice as the Super Bowl win, even if I have to tear both my ACLs.
Right.
Like, does that turn into, like, does it happen the next day, or does that happen right at the zeros?
That would suck so much.
Like, I think that would actually make it
that would make it more difficult if it happened at moment of victory.
Yeah, like, moment of victory, and all of a sudden you hear 2 gunshots, and it's, oh, my legs, I'm down. Like, that would not be okay with me. I would want at least 24 hours or 12 hours to celebrate and everything. Like, I could not handle, we won! Oh my god!
Like, yeah, like, I would like a moment to enjoy the thing that just happened. I also want to know if it's self-inflicted, because it could be, if it happens at the 0 point, at the 0 point of the ACL tear, the 0 point of the Super Bowl victory, if it happens at that moment, there's a good chance then it's self-inflicted, and it could be like, what's his kicker, celebrating and tearing the ACL at the exact same time.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I can't think of his name.
It's like the Washington or something.
Or what if it turns into, like, one of those The Ring situations where the video just tells you when you're going to die, and it'll be like that. Like, you have a countdown now.
Grammatica. Sorry. Just remembered it was Bill Grammatica.
Yes. But you just have a countdown on you. From here on out, for the rest of your life, you will tear both of your ACLs at once. And you just have that on you for the rest of your time.
And you don't know when?
Yep. It could happen any time. It could happen on an airplane. It could happen in a cramped space or something. It could happen at the worst.
That would cause a lot of stress for me, like a ton of stress for me. But I think it wouldn't at least poison the victory. And so I would take that.
Feel like, well, at least it happened.
Right.
At least it happened.
So I would take the Ring style countdown, or I guess in the Ring and in this countdown we're talking about, maybe I don't know, but I would take the looming, dawning double ACL tear over the ACL tears happening when we win.
Or even during the game, like, remember the Colts and the Colts Saints, where Manning was picked off in the second half, and that was basically the game. Like,
right,
I wouldn't
at that point too. Right,
yeah,
exact same thing.
At that sort of thing, no, that would not be okay with. I would need to be able to celebrate just a little bit before I just became wheelchair bound.
Even 12 hours actually would be fine with me. I think 10 hours on, I think, is sort of where I would unquestionably do it, and I think that somewhere within that time frame is when I would say no, and somewhere within that time frame I would have to do some heavy soul searching.
Just sort of biting your lip and giving it hell, like, all right, this is going to be a thing. This is going to happen.
Right, like someone's like, well, 6 hours afterwards, so you're not asleep, but you're not celebrating, and then boom.
Yeah.
Also, like, if someone else, again, whether or not it's self-inflicted is very important to me. So, if I get Tanya Hardinged by a Packers fan, I have so much moral high ground.
I didn't think of.
That's because I think in really self-serving and awful ways. So
I feel like I'm more likely to have that sort of situation happen, and yeah, it's possible. I don't think I'd react very well to it, but I think that is going to wrap up a successful 2-part show
with an ACL tear. Yeah, perfect.
It's an ACL tear. Yeah, we're starting it early, folks. Draft picks are already losing their ACLs, so it makes sense that we're going to end on the ACL tour or ACL tear as well.
Everybody's Dante Fowler.
Yes, we are all Dante Fowler. Got anything to plug?
No, I just have 2 good player interviews that I should have had up like days ago. That I haven't finished. So one is Leon Mackey, who has just a fascinating story, and I love it. The other one is the BYU guy, the undrafted free agent, Jordan Leslie, who also actually has a super fascinating story. Both of these guys have really, I think, unique stories that are really fascinating. I'm just not very good at human interest writing, but I'm very interested in both of these stories, and so at some point this week, both of those will be published, and I think that people listening to this should look forward to it. I mean, they're unique human interest stories. It's not like I'm poor and now I'm in the NFL. It's more than that.
That is not a human interest story, because soon you will be poor again.
Awful, man. I'm cheering for both of these guys, mainly because I've talked to them.
Have you watched the Broke documentary, the 30 for 30?
I have, and I've watched other documentaries that basically do the same thing. Also, Broke documentary, not in my top half of 30 for 30s.
Oh no, definitely not. It's good. It's just not nearly in the top half.
Yeah.
I would agree. Although I think the Bo Jackson one needs to be ranked higher. The Bo Jackson one's just good.
Bo Jackson's up there. I think Pony Excess is up there. I think the U Part 1 up there.
I'd definitely rank the Pony Express. Or the one about about how much how much Donald Trump.
Yeah, Small Potatoes. Yes, that's that one. Who Killed the USFL? That one's a good one. Non-football ones, Winning Time, Reggie Miller. That one's a great one.
Great one.
Would not put Broke in that category.
Did you see the one for Brian Bosworth?
Oh, that was pretty good. I like that.
That was surprisingly good. I thought that was good. But we digress. We are wrapping up the show. Let's stop talking about 30 for 30. You can donate to the show. You can check out our big list of former podcasts. You can check it out at NorseCodePodcast.com. You can check out Arif on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can check out Dusty at Dusty O'Connell. Is it still Dusty O'Connell? I feel like I'm going to have a little moment here and do a little edit, because it's at Dusty O'Connell without the apostrophe.
Yeah, I don't think you can have apostrophes.
You cannot have apostrophes on Twitter, so Dusty is at Dusty O'Connell. I am at Big Mono or at NorseCodeDN. Please follow the show. We've also done some additional work to the Facebook page. Dusty has been working quite a bit on the Facebook page, so feel free to check out the Facebook page for Norse Code. Easily searchable, and I believe we have links to that all over the website. So, for Arif, for Dusty, who is on assignment, sure. My name is James. I'm the producer. We'd like to thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for donating. Thank you for supporting us. And we will see you next week. And our formula is this: you should be happy with the draft.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this: we go out, we hit people in the mouth.